radio mechanic here, and tonight we've got something a little bit different. My sister came by this afternoon to ask me to print off some photographs on my photo printer for another sister of ours who has Down syndrome. Robin and I share duties taking care of Heidi, who has Down syndrome, and since my parents have passed, we pass back and forth and share duties taking care of her. And during the day she goes to a daycare center. But at any rate, they have a project at the daycare center, and she's putting together a portfolio or a booklet, if you will, of family photographs. It gives them something to do, and you know, it's a nice little keepsake when they're done. So we were printing off photographs. At any rate, when she showed up, she dropped off this little unit. Now I should say that Robin works for an oral surgeon, and she has been bringing home for quite a while the electronic stethoscopes that the surgeon uses. Of course, it's a surgery. They have to put people under anesthesia. And the assistants who work there, the young assistants, tend to take these stethoscopes, and when they unplug them, instead of grabbing them by the jack, and this is actually one of the jacks, it's a little cheap plastic jack, instead of grabbing it by the jack to unplug it, they just yank the cord out. And of course, in very short period of time, the wires become broken. So she brings them to me. I take these plastic jacks off, and this is the first one I've had that the shell wasn't broken on. Most of them the shell is broken. So I replace them with a good quality, and it's nothing but a stereo phone jack, a small miniature phone jack. And I replace them with a good quality jack. And the repair is about, you know, a quarter of what the unit costs the doctor. He's happy, I'm happy. It doesn't take me long. It's not a tough job, and every couple of weeks I get to repair a couple of those. Well, tonight she came home with this. And this is one of the digital dental x-ray units that's replacing film. A lot of the dentistry offices now are using digital photographs. This unit comes in 3 different sizes. It comes in one that's 22 by 30 millimeters with a 900 by 1200 pixel resolution. They call that the pediatric unit. There's another size that's 27 by 37 millimeters that's 1200 by 1600 pixels, which is what they call the general use one. And then there's this one. This is the large one, what they call the bite wing unit, and this is 32 by 44 millimeters and has a resolution of 1440 by 1920, which is pretty impressive. So I looked the thing up online, see if there was any data, and I found the construction of the head, anyway, was all I found. And as Big Clive would say, we have a wee doodle here. And if I can get this into the camera. And what it consists of is a plastic housing on the top. They have a rubber shock guard underneath the plastic housing. Then there's a scintillator layer, and the scintillator is nothing but an object or device that will glow under radiation, much like the phosphors on a CRT screen. Beneath that is a layer of fiber optic that's an X-ray shield that keeps the X-rays from passing through and allows the light to go through. Beneath that is a CMOS sensor, just like you'd have in your digital camera, and of course it's going to be monochrome. Underneath that is a printed circuit board with some electronics on board, and then the bottom cover. And then this is hermetically sealed because this has to go into your mouth, and of course they have to be able to clean it. Now they do put a sheath over the thing when it goes into your mouth, so it's not going from your mouth to the next person and so on. But they still sterilize these. They put them in a sterilizing solution, so they have to be absolutely hermetically sealed. Now my sister, who's fairly clever, discovered that if she takes this control head or this control unit that goes with it, it's a USB unit, plugs in just like a USB digital camera, and there's the sensor head, and then there's this block. And she found that if she carefully wiggles it right here, they can get it to work. Of course, as soon as it drops, it stops working. So the assumption is at this point that it's just a broken wire. So what I'm planning on doing is if I can get this unit open, I'm just going to cut the wire back and repair it and put a couple more dollars in my pocket and make the doctor happy. So let's see if, as Big Cly said, we can take it to bits. And I see no screws, so I'm just going to try to shove my fingernail down in here. Oh, stuff is cracking. And, oh my goodness, that went a lot easier than I thought it was going to. I figured that was going to be a struggle. That just fell apart. But the bad news is, I'm not seeing any circuitry here. I'm seeing a metal can. There's a push button here for remote control. There's a little rubber button right there, but this is completely enclosed in a metal can. I'm assuming they do that so that the x-rays don't affect it. This is going to take a couple minutes. We're going to do a time shift. Well, there we are. Through the magic of digital editing, we are back. There's a surprisingly complex board here inside this guy. This is a 29GL256, which is a flash memory chip, 110 nanoseconds. We have a 12-bit A to D converter, an AD9235, and then a couple of other chips that I can't identify from the number. One of them, I believe, is a USB driver because this thing is USB 2.0. And the one that's over here by the choke, I'm going to assume is a DC to DC converter. It's got a number on it that doesn't come up with any data at all when I look the thing up. I was going to try to take the board out and flip it over, but it is obviously glued down inside of this half of the case, and since I want to try to make this thing work again, I'm not going to try to prise that out of there and take a chance in doing damage. I am very, very happy that the end that failed is on the USB end, because this is the camera end. Excuse me, there's the USB end. You can see there's only standard 4 wires. Over here, we have the end coming from the camera, or from the imager, I should say. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 wires coming out of that little guy. So I'm hoping that that hasn't failed, because this cable is soldered in to this little brass strain relief, which means I'm going to have to, first of all, try to get this loose. This almost appears to be molded onto the cable. So I'm going to see if I can get that to slide down far enough to cut back this cable an inch or two. Then I'm going to have to desolder all this braid from this brass strain relief, clean out the hot snot glue that's in here, and try to feed the wires through and repair the USB cable. If I'm successful at doing that, I'll give it back to my sister, tell her to take it to work and see if it functions, and tell her if it doesn't function, throw it in the trash, because I don't even want to attempt doing that to this end. This is just not worth the work. I can't charge enough for this to make it worth my time and effort if it's anything more than that. More out of curiosity than anything, I'm going to see if I can fix it. So, again, through the magic of digital editing here, I'm going to see if we can get this thing apart, and we'll come back. Well, through the magic of time-lapse, we've progressed a little bit here, and I was wrong. This board was not glued in. What appeared to be adhesive through these 2 back holes was some kind of conformal coating that's on the inside of both of these covers, evidently to keep anything from short-circuiting against the metal. And when I put the heat to this piece here to get the braid of the cable loose, it popped out, and there it is in my hands. So once again, on the top surface, we've got 256 megabytes of flash memory. We have a 12-bit A to D converter. We have a chip here, since it's close to this inductor, I believe is the 3.3 volt supply to control the chip, or to supply the chip rather. A couple of devices that I cannot find any information on. The numbers don't appear anywhere on the internet. I did a search, been playing around for about half an hour. But on the flip side of this, we have more magic. And This guy here, which is directly opposite the flash memory, which makes sense, is a Cypress CY7 C68013A, which is a USB microcontroller, transceiver, and programmable peripheral interface. Easy for me to say. And this, I believe, is just another USB communications chip. The numbers on these two guys, again, there's no cross-reference on the internet that I can find anywhere, but judging by where it is right next to the USB, I'm assuming that's the driver for the USB communications. This is the controller, and that's probably the driver. At any rate, we're going to try to get the cable put back on, and that was a bit of a trick in itself. The unit's extremely well made. I think I mentioned this is made by Kodak, and there we go. There's the, oops, let's see if we can get this so it's not reflecting so badly. There we go. It's a Kodak unit, and it's very well made. There's a little plastic shove-in, conically shaped ferrule, if you will, that has to be driven underneath the jacket of the cable, and that will bind it into this strain relief. Very nice. I had a chore getting that out. It appears they used some sort of cyanoacrylic super glue once this was together to glue it in there, so I had to drive a probe underneath here and break everything loose. The real trick was getting this back over the top of the shield. Now that I have that down here, we'll strip some of the shield back. We'll verify that the, in fact, you can see how it flares the end of the jacket here. We will strip back the shielding a little bit and verify we have integrity from this end of the cable down to the USB plug. Then I'll solder everything in there and try to get the package put back together. And we'll do another time jump here. I'm sure you don't want to see me tediously strip back this shielding and try to, get everything back together. So we'll jump ahead. Well, it wasn't nearly as terrible as I thought it was going to be. We've managed to get the little ferrule up into the cable here and roughly soldered it into place. I'll finish that up when it goes back into the tin case. We've got the shield wire and the 4 USB wires through, so now all that remains to be done in here is to, one at a time, I'll take these guys out and I'll put the USB wires where they belong. Now they are marked on the board, but it's always safer just to leave a tail of the original cable there and change them out one at a time. That way you don't make a mistake. We'll remove the shield and replace it with the one from the freshly cut cable. And I took off about 2 inches of the cable just to make sure I got past whatever break was in there. We verified we have continuity from the USB connector up through the wires here. We've wiggled and bent around the USB connector, and hopefully when I put this thing back together it'll work. Now I do not have the proprietary software to herd all the magic pixies into organized groups and put a display on the screen. I doubt if I plug this in it will be recognized as a camera, but we'll give it a shot at any rate, see what happens. It's a USB connector. What can possibly go wrong by just plugging it in and seeing what happens? But first of all, we'll get this thing put back together, get everything soldered in place. We'll put the shield can back on and solder it in its appropriate places to put everything there, and we'll pick it back up. So once again, alrighty, we've got the flap top over there warming up its electrons. We had us a 3-dog night last night. My weather station recorded wind chills of 36 below zero here in southern New Hampshire. I'm way down here in Hooksett, and I don't even want to know what it got up in the North Country. Those guys can have it. We've got the hot snot glue warming up, and we'll put a little dab of hot snot glue here because the OEM put it there, and I figure it must be important. You can probably hear the heating plant groaning away in the background. It's been doing a lot of that in the last 24 hours. So I'm just going to ignore the fact that it's on, and you'll have to live with it. Even though I've got brand new thermal pane windows all the way around the house, every window in the house, upper pane and lower pane, had ice on the inside of it this morning. And it's been a chore for the heating plant to keep up with everything. I went around a couple years ago and sealed everything up and put fresh insulation in, and by God, it's still chilly in here this morning. I'm down in the basement lab, and normally it stays around 70 down here between the residual heat from the heating plant and the small electric heater I have in here, but it's 64 degrees. I've even got my slippers on this morning. Okay, the heating plant shut down. Maybe the hot snot glue is ready to rock and roll. And all the original OEM did is put a little gob of the stuff right down here. And that was just to keep the wires from shucking back and forth and straining the solder joints. So there we go. We got a little dab will do ya. Get rid of all the feathers that are sticking off of here. And we'll unplug the hot snot glue so we don't set something on fire. That's pulled out. This little vise, by the way, that I've popped loose from the bench, usually sticks pretty well. I bought that at the Radio Shack. Oh, I'll bet this thing is close to 40 years old. And while I do have some of the commercial electronics benchtop vacuum vices and circuit board holders, I have found that this thing has worked so well over the last 40 years. It does probably 60% of the stuff that I do with it. Let's see if it'll stick down here. Oh, whoop. Yeah, maybe. Oh, we got crud underneath it. There we go. This thing just locks itself down and holds 80% of the stuff I want to do. It is just the handiest thing. It doesn't take up any room on the bench. It's all made out of plastic. It's light. But it has just done a wonderful job for me for like 40 years. And I don't know what I paid for that thing. I bet it wasn't more than about $8 at the time. But it has worked out very well. So thank you, Radio Shack. Not everything you make is crap. And that looks pretty solid. We'll bring the case over here. Let's see, we've got an on and off switch here, so that's got to go on this piece. So that drops in there. Then we'll put the top cover back on, and I don't think this had any left or right or up or down. And let's see, we'll try matching up. Yeah, we can't even match up. There's not much solder there, so we'll slip this puppy back over the top. And we'll bring my handy dandy little Radio Shack vise back over here, just to hold all the works together while we have at it with the slobbering iron. Now, I've got a Hakko and I've got a Weller for doing fine electronics work, but I'll tell you what, when you want a lot of heat in a hurry and you want to get something soldered, it's pretty tough to beat one of these old Weller guns. This one happens to be the D550 with a high heat range of 325 watts. And when you want heat in a hurry and a lot of it in one place, this is your boy. And we'll just put a little, that's all we're going to put right there. We'll move down to the other end and squoze the case together a little bit. And we'll put a little dab down here. It's probably going to end up opening this thing up. I'm going to tell my sister, if this thing doesn't work, bring it back to me. And I just want to do a tear down of the imaging head if it doesn't work. But we're not going to do that now because it's hermetically sealed for medical reasons. And, you know, to keep it sanitary so everybody's old spit doesn't get down inside the thing. And I do have a radioactive source, a piece of thorium tungsten, which would probably show up just fine if I can get the thing to work. In fact, I'm going to see if she can get her hands on the software. The doctor might be willing to let me put it on my laptop to test these things. If I can get this one working, he just might be willing to let me have the software so that I can repair them in the future and make sure they're working before I send them back. And that's all that takes. Boy, that gun is fast. You can get in and out in a heartbeat with this thing. And I don't know if I really need to do this on the ends, but this is the way the OEM did it, and I'm assuming they did it for a reason. Probably so the integrity of the ground is good all the way down the unit. And we'll get in here and do a quick one on this end. And boy, that's all it takes. You're just in and out with this thing. They are the handiest little thing to have in the lab. We'll force the insulation back up where it belongs. There we go. Nice up and cozy. Run this little ferrule up here, and let's see. I'll drop the little rubber push button back in. Get that guy out of the way. And let's see which way does... Oh, okay. That's got a little molded spot right there, so that comes up over the top. Oh, this is cracked. My goodness, it's seen some rough duty. Tell you what, rather than you watching me super glue this thing back together, I'll do that off camera, and we'll be back, plug it into the laptop, and see if anything happens. We put some stupid glue on there and a bunch of Jed clampets. I call it stupid glue because it's usually the glue I reach for right after I've done something really stupid. And you can ignore all the cable stuff here. These are just scope probes, and I've been using these clamps to hang the scope probes from a rack behind me. So I just left the cables on there rather than unwind them, and see if the super glue didn't hold there. It held here and didn't hold on here. Alright, so after we try this thing on the flap top and see if we get anything from it, I'll come back and re-glue that one piece. Now, I figure I have about a 0.01% chance of this thing being recognized as a camera. But okay, let's we're over here at the flap top, and we'll plug this thing into the USB port and see what happens. Right there, I think. Oh, come on. There we go. Yep, we got the old bing ping. It says installing device driver software. Check here for status. And come on, wake up. I really don't think this is going to work. It's probably installing a USB driver, but I doubt that the imager is going to give us anything. You never know. Like an old engineer friend of mine once said, you can't lose them all. But I suspect we will lose this one. And while this is churning away trying to install something, I'm going to run over to the other side of the shop here and grab a piece of thoriated tungsten, because if I do get lucky, I bet there's enough radioactivity for it to register something on the imager. Okay, this thing's been churning away for about 10 minutes, and it still claims it's installing the device driver software, so obviously it's going nowhere. And I grabbed my piece of thoriated tungsten here. This is tungsten welding rod, figuring it would emit enough radiation for the device to give us some kind of an image if it did wake up. And then I realized that the thorium is an alpha emitter, not a gamma emitter, and probably won't make it through the plastic. Generally, a piece of paper is just about enough to stop alpha radiation. Although the stuff is dangerous if you grind it to a point. They use the thorium and the tungsten to help initiate the arc during welding processes. And normally if you're doing TIG welding, and TIG is tungsten inert gas, when the inert gas is usually argon or an argon-helium mix, you sharpen this to a point and it's shielded by a gas flow when it's in the torch head, and water cooled at the same time. But at any rate, the camera's not going to install. I don't have a gamma emitter, I only have an alpha emitter, so we're pretty much at the end. So I'm going to unplug this. It was not installed successfully. Not a big surprise. So we'll take this thing over. We'll put a little more super glue over here and clamp it again on this edge so that the thing's held together and my sister can take it back to work. And should it come back to me non-functional, we can rip apart the imaging head and see what that looks like inside. But again, I'm not going to do that now because it's hermetically sealed and it is a piece of medical equipment. So nothing more exciting. We'll put this away and move on. And thanks for watching. Please give us a thumbs up. And we'll be back with another video soon. Take care.